to, welcome back to my channel So Little Time, and my name is Karen. Today I'm going to be sewing up the Sienna trousers from the Pattern Preacher, who are a company based in Leicester, and they have kindly given me the pattern for free in return for sewing up the garment and giving you my review basically. So I thought I'd do a sew along style video, and I also asked you to ask me any questions just for fun so I can answer the questions during the sewing process. So I'm going to do it in a slight kind of tutorial style way as well, just so if you are following along and you're making these trousers, then you at least, have my guidance as well if needed. So I'll just show you the pattern. So it's the Pattern Preacher Sienna trousers, and they're a wide leg pant, which has got quite a high waist, and they have pockets as well. And it comes with obviously an instruction booklet, and inside you will find all the information you need for the body measurements and the finished garment measurements. And then it's got step-by-step instructions as well. Also included in the pattern is a glossary of terminology, which I thought was really, really good. And inside that, you just have what everything basically means. So if you are a little bit stuck, you could just refer to that, which I thought was just a nice addition to the pattern. Now I'm going to be changing the instructions slightly, so I will go off-piste a little bit as I sew along, so hopefully that will help you out a little bit, as I did find some of these instructions just slightly confusing or in a way that I wouldn't usually sew up a garment. So I'm just going to do it in my sort of way, so hopefully you can follow along with that okay. Okay, so we shall get started. So I've got all my fabric folded over, and I've put my pattern pieces on the fabric, and you just need to make sure that you line up the grain line. So there's a straight grain line on your pattern piece, and you just need to measure from that grain line to the selvage of the fabric, and just make sure that that is accurate all the way along, so that you know it is definitely on the straight grain, and you do that for each pattern piece. So you'll have 2 of your centre waistband pieces on the fold, and 2 of the back waistband pieces just on the fabric, and again a pocket, and then your front and back pair of trousers, and just ensure that those grain lines are accurate. Okay, when you're ready to start cutting out your fabric, you can either use dressmaking pins to pin down the pattern pieces and then use your dressmaking shears, or you can use your pattern weights with a rotary cutter, whatever your preference is. I always like to use pins and my dressmaking shears, just because that's my preferred method. So when you do cut out, make sure that you keep your scissors on the table as you're cutting, so you don't move the fabric about too much, and likewise when you're using a rotary cutter, just make sure you keep your hands on the fabric as you use your rotary cutter to cut around the fabric pieces. Okay, so once you've got all of your pattern pieces cut out on your fabric, all you need to do is then transfer any markings that need to be transferred onto the fabric, and then also cut in the little notches. So there is just one dart on the back pattern piece that you need to make sure that you mark on the fabric if you need to, so that when you come to sew that, it's easy to follow the straight lines. And then just make sure you snip all the notches on every single pattern piece so that they all line up when you come to sew them. So that's what I'm going to do now. Just thought I'd quickly mention, whilst I was cutting out my fabric and putting the notches in, I just noticed that I hadn't mentioned that the pocket piece, this is the top section here, and the straight bit, if that wasn't obvious to you, and the curved section is obviously the bottom bit. So if you've got a directional print, just make sure you've got that the right way up on your fabric. Just to mention that I am actually filming in my conservatory today, as this is my sewing space where I've got the table. When the sun comes onto the conservatory, it does make the corrugated roofing crack a little bit, so I'm really sorry if you do hear that. It's when it expands, when it gets heated up and then sort of shrinks back down again when the sun goes off it. It's really annoying, but we have just got used to it, so we don't really notice it too much, so I do apologise for that noise. So before we get started, I just want to say that I am making the size 10 graded out to a size 12 at the hips, so I have actually made 3 12s before I have gone ahead and cut it out in my official fabric. So I basically made the size 12 first of all, and that fitted me absolutely fine on the hips, although I did have a lot of excess around my waist, surprise surprise. So I then thought I'd just try the straight size 10 just to see if that would fit me on the hips, but no, unfortunately that was way too tight on the hips, but perfect on the waist. So I have now graded between the 2 sizes. Now, I'm not very good at grading, I don't do it very often, and so I've just kind of drawn a line from the size 10 at the waist, and then just gone out very slightly to the hip to the size 12, and I've obviously had to transfer those pattern markings onto the pocket sections as well, so they match up when you align them with the trouser legs. So I did another toile after that just to check that that fitted okay, and that was fine. I do still have a slight pulling around my crotch area, but it's not something that is going to really annoy me, so fingers crossed it turns out okay in this official fabric. So in the instruction booklet, the first thing it tells you to do is to sew the pockets, but what I'm actually going to do is the waistband first. So I'm going to get my waistband pieces, so I'm going to get the centre waistband piece and then the two back pieces which are separate, and I'm just going to sew those together, and they have notches where you can line them up, so just check I've got the right way around. This fabric is really similar both sides, so it's really confusing to see which is which. I don't think it really matters, I think it's the same on both sides. So what I'm actually going to do is sew it up on my sewing machine first, and then I'll overlock anything that I need to as I go along. I just like to do that, so if I do make an error or any problems along the way, it's easier to unpick, you know, because if you use your overlocker, then unpicking overlocking stitches is a nightmare. Right, so I'm just going to pin these together now. I'm going to start off with the questions then. So kicking off is Michelle from Sewing Bunny. She also has a YouTube channel as well, so please do check her out. She has kindly sent me a question, which was, if you or your personality were personified as a fabric, what colour and design would you be and why? Now I would definitely choose a yellow fabric, because I think I've got quite a sunny personality. I'm quite vibrant, I'm quite loud occasionally, especially if I'm socialising with my friends. I'm always sort of the life and soul of the party. Yeah, always the one that brings the fun. And I think the design, probably something floral. Yeah, I do like flowers, so that would sort of be really me. And I think a lot of people know how girly I am as well. I like to wear dresses, you know, and get dressed into nice girly kind of outfits and things. Yeah, so that's what I would be. I would be a very bright yellow floral fabric, and probably the fabric type, maybe like a brocade or something with a bit of structure. So if you made a dress, it would be quite something. Yeah, so that's that one. So the seam allowance for this pattern is 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre. So I'm going to go straight ahead into getting this sewn up. And then what I'm going to do is press those seams open. So that's one waistband piece, and then I've got the other one to do as well. Now you will notice that I haven't actually interfaced my pieces, and that is purely because I don't actually have any interfacing, unfortunately, so naughty. So if you do have interfacing, make sure that you do interface your waistband pieces, because it will give that waistband a lot more structure. So mine's just going to be a little bit more soft. I have done that in the past, so I don't mind, it's fine. But if I had interfacing, I would definitely have used it. Press those waistband seam lines just flat. I'm not going to overlock them because they're obviously going to be hidden inside each other, so I don't think there's a need for that. Okay, so they're all pressed nice and flat. What I'm actually going to do is fold the waistband piece in half, and at the bottom of the waistband, at the very centre, I'm just going to put a very small snip, and that's purely so I can line it up with the centre front of the trousers when I've sewn the trouser crotch together, just so I know that I'm lining it up accurately. So I'll do that on both pieces. Just a small snip, and then I'm going to just put those waistband pieces to one side for now. Okay, next up I'm going to get my pocket pieces, and you need to fold them. You'll see that there's a snip at the top and the bottom. You need to fold them in half so that the edges meet, so it will look like that, you can see. So the edges will meet there, and you're just basically following that curve along the bottom to make sure that that's all lined up. So I'm going to pin along the bottom. Now, in the instructions, this is where it tells you to French seam, but I'm not going to do that. I am going to overlock the bottom. I don't want to have a French seam. So I wrote down how to do this, because this is one of the instructions that I actually got confused with, because obviously it says to French seam it and I wasn't, so then I didn't really know which sides I was supposed to be putting together. So you take your pocket pieces and you fold them right sides together. So right sides together, that is what you want to do if you are not French seaming. If you are French seaming, then you can just follow the instructions in the booklet, and in that glossary of terminology it does tell you how to do the French seams as well. So I've just pinned the bottom curve of the pocket. And you need to make sure that obviously if your fabric is like mine, that the front and the back look exactly the same, then make sure that your pockets are going to be the right way as such. So you've got one which will be that way, and then you need one obviously on the opposite side, so make sure you're folding them so that they are a pair rather than two the same. Okay, so next question then that was sent to me is from Shelley Scott, and she has asked, do I ever watch TV or listen to the radio or a podcast whilst I'm sewing? And if so, what do I watch or listen to? Okay, well, I don't actually listen to any podcasts or the radio. I only ever listen to the radio if I'm in the car or when I'm cooking or cleaning or washing up. But I do watch on my phone other sewing vlogs. So I do try to catch up with as many of my fellow sewing vloggers as possible, because there are quite a few of us now, so obviously keeping up with everybody is quite hard work. And when I was on holiday I didn't watch all that many, and when I came back I had about 40 outstanding to watch, and I have over time managed to catch up with most of those, which has been great. But yeah, so whilst I'm sewing I tend to have my phone sat next to me and I watch that with headphones in so nobody else can hear it. Or sometimes some trash TV, so like I love watching Married at First Sight Australia at the minute. That's been really quite good viewing. Yeah, and I do like a little bit of rubbish TV, to be honest, just my little outlet of normal, normal world. Yeah, so that's basically what I do. Now I did actually buy something that you could put on your bobbin winder to put your phone on, but it's not that sturdy, so I just tend to use, I've got like this little pop stop thing on the back of my phone, and I tend to pop that out and just put it next to me, and I just pause it all the time whilst I'm up and down, pressing it and that kind of thing. Okay, so I've pinned those, and I'm now just going to overlock the bottom of those pocket pieces. Overlocked. I'm just going to give them a quick press just to flatten out those seams. Yeah, they're all nice and flat. I've also ironed the crease down the middle, so you'll see that these, the way these pockets are constructed is that you don't have a separate pocket bag and pocket lining, so that's quite nice. I do quite like the way they are constructed. So that is that. I'm going to put those to one side for now, and then I'm going to take my back trouser leg pieces and sew the dart. So I've marked the darts on my fabric. Bring it into you so you can see. It's a yellow bit that you should be able to see there. And the way I've done that is that I've used some carbon paper. So this is what I use. It's Prim dressmaker's tracing paper, but it's actually carbon paper. So I bought that from Guthrie and Garney in Birmingham a while ago, and it's got a yellow sheet and a white sheet inside. And I've just cut a section off of the yellow sheet, and you basically lay that on top of your fabric, and then use a tracing wheel to go over the pattern piece where your dart is marked, and that imprints that that yellow onto the fabric, so it's really clear to see where your dart is. And I just find that the easiest way to sew a dart. So then I will bring the legs together and the point and just pin it appropriately. Okay, so whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to answer the next question, which is from Sally Dingle, and she has asked, if you were told that you could only make dresses or separates for the rest of your life, which would you choose? Now, this was a no-brainer for me because I'm pretty sure if you follow me, you will know that I love wearing dresses, and I haven't actually got that many separates, but even though I'm trying to incorporate a lot more separates into my wardrobe at the moment, I do really like wearing dresses, mainly because I actually find them more versatile because you can layer them. You know, in the summer it's really easy to just throw a dress on and it's just no fuss and more comfortable, and then even in the autumn winter, you know, I can layer it up with a top underneath like this one, put tights on, cardigan over the top. I just find it more comfortable, and then wearing tights, I just find that it's actually warmer than wearing like jeans really. I do get cold in jeans, so yeah, not really a separates girl. I am definitely a dress girl, and I love a pinafore dress, as you know. So right, I think that's pinned appropriately on that one. Let's just pin the other. So you can see I'm not following these instructions as they have laid them out in the booklet, just because I like to get some of these finicky bits out of the way first, and it just makes it easier when you are actually sewing the whole garment up. Okay, so whilst I'm pinning this one, I shall answer my next question. Now the next question is from Anna. You Got Me in Stitches. She is also on YouTube as well, so please do check her channel out. And she asked me quite a hard question actually. Thank you, Anna. And she asked, if there was anybody in the world you would sew a garment or garments for, whom would it be? Why, and what would you sew for them? So I had to really think hard about this, and I was thinking, you know, pop stars, high flyer people, you know, who are in the social media kind of world, and I just couldn't really think of anybody who really took my fancy for me to actually make clothes for them. But then I thought, actually, do you know who I'd really like to make clothes for? Probably really obvious, would be the Queen, because I just think she's got such an elegant style, and I love the neat lines of her suits that she wears, and I just think that they would be a really pleasurable sew. So yes, I would definitely like to make garments for the Queen, and I think the fabrics of her suits are really quite something, and I think they'd be lovely to work with and easy to sew. I'll say that. There's probably a lot of tailoring involved in that. I'm no tailor, that's for sure. But yeah, so that would be why I would want to sew for her. You know, obviously she'd look really smart. Okay, so I'm going to sew these darts then. I've done that the wrong way round. Put the pins on the wrong side, so I can't whip them out. Let's do it that way. Quickly do that. Lovely. Right, okay, so let's get these darts sewn. So when you sew a dart, you don't back tack at the end of the dart, you just go off the edge of the fabric and then leave some long tail threads, thread tails, and then just tie them in a knot. So I'm just following that yellow line, just makes it really accurate. Okay, so I've come off the edge of the fabric, and then I'm just going to take some long thread tails and I'm going to tie that in a knot. Yes, that's my dart in. Just untangle the thread, and then I'll just do a double knot. So once and then twice, like that, and then I'll just snip off quite close to the knot. Get rid of those threads. Okay, so then just put your back leg out the way, do the second dart. Then take one of your front legs, and we are going to do the pockets, put the pockets on them. So you need to make sure you get the right. So what you need to do is get your front leg piece, and where you have this scooped out section where the pocket is going to be, you need to get the pocket so that you can see. I'll come up and stand up and show you, it'd be easier. So here's the front leg piece, and you have the scooped out section just here for the pocket. Then you need to get the corresponding pocket that also has that scooped out section here. So that's the correct side. So lay your trouser leg face up, facing you. You have your trouser leg facing up, and then you take your corresponding pocket piece, get that curved edge, and literally just line it up with the edge of that curve. So line up the notch first, and then do the rest of the seam. I'm just going to overlock that seam allowance now. So I'll just do that. And the reason I didn't overlock that initially is because I wanted to keep the seam allowance. So I've not actually cut any of the seam allowance off whatsoever, because now what you need to do is understitch the pocket to the seam allowance, so that when you turn it to the other side, that it will bring the fabric round slightly. So I'm just going to flip my pocket over so I can see the right side of the trousers and then the inside of the pocket, and just I'm going to put on my sewing machine. I'm not going to pin it or anything, just literally line up the edge of my walking foot with the seam line, making sure that I've got the seam allowance on the pocket side, and I'm just going to move my needle slightly, the width over by about 3, and that will just be in the right sort of place for going along. And I just like to take this bit a little bit slower. If I come in and just show you that, so you'll see that I have literally just stitched along there, and that's on the pocket side, and that is just holding that seam allowance down, and it just means that when you now press this to the other side, it will actually roll in really nicely, and you'll just get a nice edge there for the pocket. So I'm just going to go over and press that now. Okay, so that's all pressed. As you can see, it's got a nice edge now. And then at the top, you'll notice that there is a notch here, and then there's also a notch here. So you actually need to line up the edges of the pocket to those notches, and I'm just going to pin at the top there and then baste across. Now in the instructions, it does actually tell you to do this all the way around the top of the trousers, but I just like to do it literally across where the pocket is going to sit. I'm just going to put 3 pins in, so I've pinned the top of the pocket, and I'm just going to baste that within the seam allowance. So bearing in mind it's a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so just do it slightly smaller. Put my needle back to its original position as well before I forget. Okay, so I'm just going to go across. I always make sure I take my pins out these days. I never used to, but I've actually broke 2 needles making the 12 for these trousers. Okay, so that's just basted across, and that's just going to keep it in place there. I'm not going to bother with the bottom of that, because that will go into the seam line on the side of the trousers. Okay, so let's answer another question anyway. I've actually only got 2 more. I didn't have that many questions. So the next one is from Lynn Prentice, and she has asked me, how do you find the time to sew with your little ones, my running and everything else? Do you have to be organised, or do you sew in small chunks? I thought this was a really good question actually, because I think a lot of people probably wonder this. Now I do all my sewing in the evening when the boys have gone to bed. I don't do any on the weekend in the day. It's purely in the evening usually, and I know I'm doing it in the day today, but that's because all the boys are at school and my husband is at work, so I've got time to quickly do this, although my role, is housewife. Yes, so in the evening we run quite a tight ship as a family, and by that I mean that we do things on time. So their bedtime, we get them ready at 6:30 for bed, and they're in bed by 7, stories read, brush teeth, the whole shebang. Yes, they do mess about on occasion, we have to go up and tell them to get back into bed. But yeah, usually they are that tired by 7 o'clock, they're out like a light. So from 7 o'clock is my time then to sew on an evening. Although I do share out my time as much as I can with my husband. So we'll have a night where we'll play a game or two with each other. We do enjoy board games and that kind of thing. At the moment we've borrowed a few off his sister, so we've got some different ones to try out. Or we'll watch a bit of TV together. Or sit outside if it's a nice evening, which isn't very often in the UK, but we have had quite a lot of nice evenings this year. So we just sit there and have a drink and just watch the sunset at the bottom of the garden. We're really lucky that we've got a very big garden. So that is what I do. I mainly sew in the evening, so it doesn't really affect anybody else. And sometimes my husband will go off to bed early because he gets up really early for work. So he's a lark and I'm a night owl for sure. So we're very different to each other. As I was saying earlier, I'm the life and soul, the loud one. My husband's an introvert, really quiet. Doesn't want to bring attention to himself, that kind of thing. So we kind of complement each other in that respect. So with running as well, my running has taken a massive backseat to how much I used to run since having children. I just don't have the time as much as I used to because, hobbies are selfish, aren't they? So I run for a club, which currently isn't open anymore because of the lockdown situation. So hopefully that will resume sometime in the future because I really do like social running and running with others. It gets me out, it makes me go at a speed maybe that I'm not comfortable with. And I'll try a little bit harder, whereas if I'm on my own out running, I do tend to give up a bit easier. I think, I'll just have a walk here. And as you know, I've been training in the past for marathons and that kind of thing, but for the past 2 years I haven't been able to do it because last year I pulled out because of injury and then it got cancelled because of the floods that we had, and then this year it got cancelled obviously because of COVID. So I have again deferred my place to next year, so hopefully I'll be able to do that. So again, my running is mainly on an evening once the boys have gone to bed, and in the summer it's fine because you've got the light nights and I can just go out and do that. But the joy with being part of a running club was on the darker nights I was running with others, so it was quite safe. And I wouldn't dream of running on my own in the dark because I don't like it. I get scared too easy and just don't know who's about either. So with regards to how I sew, I do tend to do it in small chunks. So I'll do maybe 2 hours on an evening. By 9 o'clock I usually pack it away because I'd like to sit down in front of the TV to chill out before I go to bed. There has been occasion where I have gone on till 10, 11 o'clock at night, but then I go to bed and I'm absolutely wired. So that doesn't really work for me. And then I do tend to batch sew. So I'll have an evening of a cutting out session or a tracing out session, and then I'll do my sewing sessions on other evenings, but I do spread it out over the week so that those evenings that I spend with my husband, I don't do sewing on those nights. And now the boys are at school, things are going to be a lot easier for me to get like the dinners ready in the day, so we can have our evening meal at like 5 o'clock because they're usually starving when they come home from school. So I'll get it prepped in the day and then just finish it off in the evening. So today we're having a curry, which is from chicken that was left over from a roast dinner I did yesterday, so that'll be a really quick, easy meal to cook, and I'll do that today so it sits in its sauces for the rest of the day because it tastes nicer when it's rather than it being completely fresh. So that's how I do it basically. So, and when they were really young, when they were babies, I did it in nap time. So, they'd have a nap for a couple of hours and I'd quickly sneak in, just do a seam here, a seam there, and that kind of thing. So that's how I fit it in. Like I say, I don't do any on the weekend, it's family time, and then on the evening it is when they've gone to bed. I don't really do it in their presence. I can't do it. They I make mistakes if people are around disturbing me all the time. and I also feel guilty for not spending time with my family if I'm doing it and they're around, so that's how I work it out. Okay, so I'm just going to put the other pocket then onto the other front leg. I'm just going to sew the understitching again to the pocket. I'm going to move my needle, just 3 spaces. Okay. Press that now again, just over to the other side of the back of the trousers. Okay, so with that one again, I have just basted across the top to keep that pocket in place. So that's the front legs done with the pockets. So the next thing that you're going to do then is get a back leg piece and a front leg piece, and you're going to sew the straight side seams. So let me just get the corresponding front, back to the front. And we need it so that the crotch curves are together, right? Okay, so you'll need the bits where there is the deep crotch area. You need to start at that section there and just pin all the way down the side seam, lining up the notches, and then you want to do that right sides together and then just stitch that into place. So, and then you'll do the other side as well on both legs. Okay, so whilst I pin this then, I'm going to answer the last question, and it's from Dee Butner, and she has asked me, do I ever sew children's clothing? Now, if you have been following me for a while, you'll know that I do on occasion sew a garment for each of my children. I have sewn World Book Day costumes, hoodies, t-shirts, and that kind of thing. I haven't actually sewn as many as I'd like, just because they grow out of things so quickly. And also they are quite fussy about what they wear, and I did make them some hoodies, I think it was last year, and I haven't really worn them all that much, so that was a bit disappointing. I think, yeah, they just didn't really like them very much. Not the fabric, just the style of the hoodie they didn't really like. So I don't sew for them as much as I'd like, but I do it on the odd occasion. And they don't actually request me to make them anything either, to be honest. So yeah, I don't mind not sewing for them. I have made garments for friends' children, and also for within the family as well. But again, I don't do that very often. I don't get to see them wearing it. They don't live very close to me. Yeah, so not very much. When I was pregnant with Harry, my eldest, I did sew up some little reversible trousers. I did quite a bit of knitting as well, but we didn't find out what we were having, so it was really hard to sort of decide what I was going to make. So I did sew some dresses and things in case I had a little girl, but in the end I had to give those away to other friends who had little girls. And whilst I was pregnant with my twins as well, we didn't find out what we were having, but although I thought we were going to have one boy and a girl, because when I had the scans, one was measuring a lot bigger than the other, so I assumed one was a girl, but no. When I had them, obviously both boys popped out. I was like, oh okay, 3 boys. And I actually do love having boys. They are such fun, really lovable children as well. Yes, so I don't sew as much as I'd like to for my children, but I probably will do as they get older. And also, you know, I don't mind making them things for World Book Day, costumes and that kind of thing, because as a dressmaker, I do like to make the costume for them rather than buy it. I just feel I've got more sense of achievement from that, and it's something a little bit different as well. Okay, so I'm just going to sew down the side seam that I've just pinned, and then I will put it through on the overlocker as well. So I've just done one side so far, and the reason I'm doing that is because I think this fabric does fray quite a bit, and my my overlocker doesn't seem to like it all that much, so I just think it's good to sew it with a straight stitch on my sewing machine first, and then I'll overlock the seams just so it's a little bit more reinforced. I'm just going to pin down the other side of the trouser leg. So this is a front and a back piece joined together, just to reiterate that. Right sides together. On the side where you have the seam of the pocket, you need to make sure that that is going to be all stitched together. So there will be 3 layers of fabric on a section. So if I just lay it out flat at the top, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to get it to line up. Sewn together, I'm just going to overlock each seam allowance just so it's nice and neat. As you can see that my fabric is fraying quite a lot. Okay, so that's one trouser leg sewn together. So I press the dart whilst I press the side seams so the dart needs to be pressed towards the centre of the back, so where the zip will eventually go in. So I've pressed that as well. So that is one trouser leg done, and then I'm just going to do exactly the same with the other 2 trouser leg pieces, so one back, one front, and then sew them together down the side seams, and I'm going to overlock them, and then we'll be popping the waistband on. No, we won't. And then we'll be sewing the crotch, so I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so my trouser legs are now sewn, and I now need to get them so they are joined. So to do that, we're going to sew the crotch seam, and the way I do it is slightly different to the way the instructions tell you, and you need one trouser leg right side out and one inside out. And then what you're going to do is put the right side out one, which is this one here, I believe, yeah, inside the inside out one. So from the top, just put the trouser inside the inside out one. So the right side out one into the wrong side out one. And then what you're going to do is actually line up the crotch seam and the top, and then just follow that seam line basically around. So let me just make sure I've got the crotch seam together. So the crotch seam basically is the lowest bit on both trouser legs. So match those seams up and pop a pin in there. The front of the trousers has one notch, so you can pin all the way from the top of the front of the trousers down to where you've just inserted that pin into the bottom of the crotch, whichever one it is. I think it's crotch, isn't it? Such a weird word. So basically inserting the trouser leg inside ensures that the right sides are facing. Now on the back crotch of the trousers, you will see that there is a double notch, and that is where the bottom of the zip is going to be, so you need to stop sewing there. So I always put a double pin in just to remind me that that is where I need to stop, and then I don't put any pins beyond that point either. So I'm just going to pin now down to that seam where we started. Okay, so I'm now going to sew from the top of the trousers to the double pin, and I will back tack at the double pin just because that is where the bottom of the zip will be inserted. I always like to take this section off of my sewing machine when I do this bit. It just is a little bit easier to get the fabric to go through. So what I've done is sewn around the crotch area from the top of the trousers down to the middle and then up to that double notch, and I've back tacked there. Now, because the zip is going to be inserted here, obviously these sections are not going to be overlocked like I would a normal seam. So what I've done is just snipped into where that double notch was, and I'm going to separately overlock those two seam allowances. And then for the rest of the seam, I will actually do a overlocking stitch all the way over the double seam allowance there, if that makes sense. Okay, so you can see that that has been overlocked up to that notch with the seams together, and then those two are separate. I probably could have done it where you could have done them separate and then just stitched them together as per a normal seam, but my overlocker doesn't like this fabric very much, so it's not very neat like that. When it's together, it's a lot neater. Okay, so the next step is to take both of your waistband pieces that we've prepped earlier, and we are going to sew those together. And you're actually going to be sewing them so that they are right sides together, and you want to sew across the top of the waistband. So you will see that the waistband does have a curve, and we're not going to be doing the bottom of the curve, we're going to be doing the top. So you need to sew the top waistband sections together. So line up your side seams, matching those. Okay, so I've pinned all across the top of the waistband then, and I'm just going to sew that together. That, and then you need to open up the waistband so that you have the right side facing you, and then if you press it so that the seam allowance is on one side, and then what you need to do is understitch that. So again, it's a form of top stitching following the seam line, just so you're going to be holding that seam allowance in place. So again, the fabric will roll slightly over to one side, so you'll then have a front and back waistband so you can decipher which is which. Okay, so I'm now going to top stitch that. So again, what I'll do is line up my walking foot with the edge of that seam line. I'm going to move my stitch width down 3, and away we go. So as you can see, I have top stitched that, and it just really makes that seam allowance sit nice and flat. And then what you'll need to do is then to fold the other piece of the waistband over the top of it. So you'll see that that sits really nicely, and just give that a press, because then what we'll do is overlock the edge and then make it a full waistband piece ready to attach onto the trousers. Okay, so that's my waistband piece done. I have overlocked the raw edges, so it's still in two pieces, sewn together in the middle, and then you overlock the raw edges on both sides, so don't overlock them together. So now we're going to actually attach it to our trousers. So let me just grab my trouser pieces, or trouser legs. So you want the trousers facing you right side up. And then the outer waistband needs to be stitched to the top of the trousers. So the side which you have the top stitching on is your inner waistband. So it's the outer waistband that we are actually going to be attaching to the trousers. So you need to align up the side seams together, so that's where I'm going to start. Okay, now I need to find my snip, there it is. So you need to find that snip that you made on the waistband in the middle earlier on. That will line up with the centre seam line on your trousers, and that will ensure that everything is accurate, so then you can pin along the rest of that side. Okay, so that's that done. I'm going to stitch across the top then to get all that attached. Sewn the waistband on, and then what I've actually done is overlocked it as well, just because my fabric is so badly fraying. You might not need to do that if yours isn't so bad. Yes, I've just overlocked that as well. So okay, now we get to the part where we have to insert the zip. So I've actually got a 16-inch concealed zip, so an invisible zip, to be installed. And what I've done is actually measured down to where the opening finishes, where the zip goes in, and I have literally just put some stitches across my zip there, just so that that's where I know it's going to be, that's the stopper basically, and then I'm just going to cut off a section of the zip underneath that and disregard that, and so that is my zip that I'm going to be using. So what we now need to do is have the trousers right side out, open up the waistband completely so it's fully open, and then you need to install the zip with your zip foot, so your concealed zip foot. And I always open up my zip and just run the iron quickly over where the teeth are, just to push them out slightly so that we just get them really close, so when you're stitching it, it will be completely invisible, fingers crossed. So I'm just going to quickly do that. So when you're popping the zip on, you need to have your waistband completely open, and then the very top of the zip will slightly overlap that seam line, so you actually just want the teeth to stop just below that seam line, because that's where your zip will need to be when it's folded over, and then all that will be hidden in there when you fold it over. So I'm just going to baste this in first before I sew it in properly, just because I like to check that it's going to fit my waist properly, and then I can change the seam allowance if necessary. So I'm literally just going to baste down this side first, and then I will baste the zip onto the other side as well. Okay, so I have installed my zipper so far. So it's a grey one, unfortunately. I'm using just what I have at the minute, just because going to shops is just a nightmare. So I basted it in first, and I was quite happy with how it was sitting. I have now stitched it in place properly, but I still need to get a little bit closer because when I do it up you can see a little bit of the grey still. So I'm going to have a go at just getting it slightly closer, and then I'm going to pause the video for today because the sun is now coming into the conservatory and I'm starting to melt, and I need to get some lunch. So I've been sewing all morning. And I'm really pleased with the progress so far of this, so I will continue on tomorrow to get this finished. I'm really liking how they are looking. I have tried them on and they're fitting really well. So yes, I'm just going to quickly go over that zip again just to get it a little bit closer if I can. Yeah, otherwise it might just have to be a feature, hey. But no, I'm really happy with them so far. So I shall see you tomorrow. Good morning everybody, right, it's the next day, so I haven't got the sun glaring in anymore, so hopefully I can get this finished this morning for you. So I finished my zip where I left you off yesterday, and I just managed to stitch it a little bit closer so that when I do it up it is completely invisible now, so I'm really happy with that. So as you can see, it looks a little bit bumpy but it does need a press, and when it's on it looks absolutely fine. What I have done is used a regular zip foot just to stitch the tape at the top here, this section here, just so it doesn't flap about. So when we come to fold the seam allowance in and fold that over, it will go with it quite easily, if that makes sense. And then also at the bottom, I just closed the zip up, used my regular zip foot and just stitched sort of down to the seam so it's fully closed. There's no gap at the bottom anymore, and I just used my regular zip foot for that. It did kind of crease a little bit on there, but I don't think it shows too much on the outside. Fingers crossed when I wear it. But yeah, I'm not great at putting in zips, I have to say. I'd love to do a course just on zips, that would be great. But yes, I'm really happy with how the trousers are fitting and how they're looking. I probably could have done with bringing it in very slightly at the very top of the zip just by using a bigger seam allowance because it is a little bit loose around my waist, but I'm going to leave it as is because I think it's quite nice to be able to tuck tops in, and I have tried it on with a couple of tops this morning, so this pink fabric is working well in my wardrobe, and I did use this fabric just because it was just what I had. So now we're going to finish the waistband off, and then we're going to hem the bottom of the trousers, and then we're basically done. So these are a really quick pair of trousers to make. I'm definitely going to be making more, so let's crack on with finishing the waistband then. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do then to finish the waistband off is I've folded the waistband over to the other side where you will see that I have my overlocking stitches on the inner waistband, and I'm going to just give that a press so it folds over nicely. And then the bottom where I've got those overlocking stitches, I'm going to fold that under slightly so it sits kind of flush with the seam allowance. So I'm just going to fold it under and have it so it sits, yeah, sort of with the seam allowance of where the trousers join, just like this. And then I'm going to pin that in place, and then what I'm going to do is actually stitch in the ditch from the front side. So literally I'm going to stitch right in that seam line so it catches the waistband on the other side, and that will sew the waistband in place all the way around. Now it doesn't tell you to do that in the instructions. What it tells you to do is to tack it down by hand, and then I think you stitch it from the other side like a visible top stitching line. I think that's what it says in the instructions if I've read it right, but I didn't want to do that. I usually do hand stitch my inner waistbands down as I have done on skirts in the past, but because my overlocking stitches don't look very nice on this fabric, because this fabric frayed quite a bit, I don't really want them on display, which is why I'm going to fold it under. Now I know it is on the inside, but I do quite like the insides to look quite neat, and I just think it'd give it a little bit more stability with me sewing stitch in the ditch rather than hand sewing as well. It'd just give it a bit more weight behind it. However, I will hand sew these bits down, so I'll fold that under there, and then I will hand sew those bits to the zip tape, and I think what I'll do is do that first. So I'll hand sew these bits to the zip tape first with that section folded under, and then those will line up nicely as well, and then I'll stitch in the ditch once I've pinned it all around. So I'm going to press the waistband first, and then fold the bottom and press that, hand stitch those bits there, and then I will stitch in the ditch all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back when I've finished. Okay, so I've hand stitched that section of the zip here, and I have now stitched in the ditch all the way around. It's not 100% even, you know, but it's secure, and from the front you can't see any stitching at all, which is really nice. So I've managed to stitch right in the ditch, and to do that I did use my clear foot. I think it's an open toe foot that I've got, so that has got quite a big gap, so I can actually see where the needle's going. I just slowed my speed right down, so I made sure I was really accurate with that. So I'm really happy with that. Like I say, it's a bit wibbly wobbly inside, but it's secure, and it just saved a lot of hand sewing, because I absolutely hate hand sewing, so if I can get out of it I will. So now I have just got to hem the trousers. Now for the hem, I think there's a 3 centimetre hem allowance, and they tell you to fold it up by 1 centimetre and then fold it up by 2 centimetres and top stitch it. Now I'm not 100% sure how it's going to look top stitch, so what I'm going to do initially is overlock my edge, just because again I've got lots of fraying threads. Gosh, that's a mouthful, fraying threads. Yeah, so I'm going to just overlock those trouser leg bottoms, and then I will decide how I'm going to hem it, because I don't know if top stitching it would look a bit funny. I might have to hand sew it. Yes, hand sewing. I mean, I could do a blind hem stitch, but I don't know how to do it. I think I do have the foot for it, but I really haven't ever tried it before, so that's something I will need to do in the future. So I'm just going to go ahead then and overlock this section here, and then I'll talk to you about what I'm going to do about the hem. Okay, I think I'm going to top stitch. I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to top stitch, and hopefully it will look okay. So I folded it up 1 centimetre, pressed it, and then folded it up another 2 centimetres, and I've pressed that and pinned it, tried it on. I do quite like the length. I'm wearing it with sandals, just tried it on with sandals, and that was fine. I won't wear these type of trousers with heels, as they're quite wide legged and I don't think they look right with heels. So I will just wear them with either sandals, little small pump type shoes, or trainer style shoes, you know, just to funk it up a little bit. But I'll show you me wearing these at the end anyway. So I've just put it under my sewing machine foot. I'm actually going to stitch at 5/8 of an inch, because that sits, then the needle sits just below the fold of that hem. Give these a press, and then that is the trousers finished. Really happy with how they have turned out. I'm going to now go and try them on, and then I'll show you what they look like. Okay, so I've got them on. I've just got them on with a cropped kind of top that I bought from the charity shop recently, and it's actually goes really well, and I actually didn't have anything to go with this top, so it's really nice that I now have a pair of trousers that goes with it. So I'm going to stand back so you can see the full length. Excuse the floor, my boys have got the farm out at the minute, and I'm under strict instructions, not allowed to tidy it away or move it. So I'm going to pan you down so you can see. Right, first of all, you can see that they are a high-waisted trouser, and I do have, like I said, a little bit of gaping at the back there where I should have brought it in a little bit more, but I think it'd be fine for tucking in tops. And then you've got these lovely deep pockets here. The only thing with my fabric is that you can actually see the outline of the pockets, unfortunately, but I'm not going to let that bother me at all. I really like how high-waisted they are. It's really, really nice. They fit really nice there. I'll just try and pan you down a bit more and move back so you can see the length. So I've just top stitched them like you saw, and they kind of come to that kind of length. Yeah, and they're really quite wide-legged, and I do really like how they look. And this fabric, it does drape and move quite nicely, so I do really like that. And then my invisible zip is completely invisible, if you can see that. There, so that's the grey zip. Yeah, really like how they look. What I will do is insert some photos as well, just so I can get different angles for you to have a look at them, and I'll insert those now for you. So really pleased with how they turned out. Like I said, I hope you've enjoyed the sew along. I'm not an expert at doing anything like this, so it's a little bit kind of, you know, up and down with filming and that kind of thing, but I hope you managed to follow along okay. And I really want to just thank the Pattern Preacher for contacting me to try out these trousers. It's my first pair of trousers, and I think I've got the bug to make another pair. I'd like to make them in a denim, a lightweight denim. I think that would look lovely and go with a lot of other tops that I've got as well. These trousers, they will go with my Paisley Agnes top that I recently made, and also my stripy top that I wear in the summer with my Miette skirts. That's a sleeveless one. It's the Grain Line Willow, the one that I cropped. So anything like cropped will go with these high-waisted trousers. Yes, so thank you very much for watching. Please do like this video if you enjoyed the content, and if you aren't already, please do consider subscribing. And also, if you would like to support my channel, then please check out my Ko-Fi page to buy me a virtual coffee. So thank you very much for staying tuned, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!